Correct. Yeah, you don't have to put anything. Yeah. You sound sprinkling.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting of the Board of Education to order. Tonight, we get to have a conversation that highlights positive results across our district at the K through 12 level. And we get to give feedback as a board about how to embrace those outcomes and the tools that have been used to get those outcomes. And so I'm really excited for this evening's conversation. I want to start by turning it over to Cindy Green.
Thank you, Board Muldrow. I'll start with Dr. Gothard. Anything you want to say?
No, I just would like to say, Chair Muldrow, members of the board, staff, community gathering, joining us tonight. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's rare that we have 3 schools at our 3 levels be able to be present with us and share some of the good work that they're doing. And, you know, I'm convinced after being back all of 7 months that MSD has always had a lot of great answers within our schools, within our community. And tonight, let us truly focus on that and in the work that we have ahead of us. You know, these aren't perhaps strategies and ideas that will work everywhere, but they certainly are ones that we should take note of and look for ways that we can incorporate them in the work that we do on a consistent basis. So thrilled to hear from our schools tonight, and I'll turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Green to get us started.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gothard. Jesse, would you mind sharing the screen? While Jesse is sharing the screen, I just want to take a moment to say this is the last work group of 2024. I was thinking about that today and I'm like, oh my goodness. 2024, our last work group. So definitely something to celebrate. If we can't celebrate about all the good work our schools are doing, celebrate. We made it through another year. Jesse, next slide, please. As always, wanting to ground ourselves in our strategic framework goals. Our first goal around every child is on track to graduate college, career, community ready. Our second goal, the district and every school in it, a place where our children, staff, and families thrive, and African-American children and youth excel in school. I think tonight you're really going to see how we are trying to realize each one of these goals, and our schools are going to give very specific examples. Next slide, please. So as Board Chair Muldrow said, and as Dr. Gothard said, tonight is about providing an update on our culture and climate with a specific spotlight into some of the early signals we have around our attendance data and also our climate survey results in terms of our staff and students and how they feel a sense of belonging in our schools and a sense of safety. So I wanted to take a minute to introduce our team before I go into a little more detail about the content. So I'm super excited to have Dr. Leah Esser here, who is our Executive Director of Student Staff Supports. Her team behind me and over there is Lily, who is our Coordinator of Progressive Discipline, Cynthia Moore, who leads our culture and climate work, and Laura Glob, who is our lead social worker with a focus on attendance. In addition to that, we have 3 schools tonight that we are going to spend some time doing spotlights, a little soundbite into each school. What you will hear tonight is where our schools have taken a risk and are testing something out, a strategy that they believe is going to work. We'll see the early results of what they are doing at their school, and also with the potential of learning from them to scale. We recognize that we also have a lot of work to do in terms of our data. There's still more in terms of acceleration, but we're really excited tonight to be able to highlight from our schools. So our schools we have tonight are Lakeview. We have New, the principal of Lakeview, who is online. She is joining us virtually. We have Ellen, who is their culture and climate coach, who is right here next to Leah Esser. We have Alex Thompson, who is the principal of Sherman. He is also online tonight, juggling some children and also being here, so give him a little grace. And then we have Matt Hendrickson, Dr. Hendrickson, our principal of Memorial High School, and Suzanne Blackamore, the assistant principal. So we will do little talking, and most of the talking will be from our schools in terms of the work for tonight. Next slide, please, Jesse. And in kind of fashion that we've done, you have seen that we're really trying to focus on this continuous improvement process and really thinking about these guiding principles that we're using over the last few years to get better at getting better and really focusing on disciplined ways of working, data routines, and continuing to focus on these core principles of improvement. Next slide. A reminder around our district improvement goals and our performance objectives by 2027. These are the goals that we have set. What you will once again hear from tonight is kind of our implementation data that's giving us signals that we're on the right track to meet our goals by 2027. Obviously, we will continuously improve, but we feel really good about what we're able to share tonight. Next slide, please, Jesse. So a little bit about the system level things that have been happening that have allowed our schools to be able to do the implementation and the daily. If you remember, thank you to the Board of Education. For this year, we did investments around additional staff to support our student services and to support our mental health services. That was allocation with psych and social worker. We also invested in a new portal in Infinite Campus that really supports our attendance, both from the parent-facing side as well as from the school-facing side that has been really important to the work we've done. And we also are really excited about a contract that we have with Attendance Work that is also coaching us here centrally with the team, but also supporting our schools with continuing to think about what it is that we need to do differently in order to support our students to show up every day in school. A reminder to the board also, back in June, we revised our attendance policy, and that policy has gone into effect this year. Some of what you will hear tonight, we also believe are the implementation efforts of the changes to our policy. And we also have our schools doing attendance support plans, so we can really focus on a tiered level of support for our students and really make sure we're thinking about each individual student. And then we have some district-wide strategies that we've begun to implement this year. We have a district attendance team that hasn't been enacting since pre-COVID. We're excited about getting that up and running. And we're really focusing on school attendance teams. So the work of attendance does not just live with the individual of the social worker, but is definitely collective efforts. And I think you'll hear about that from one of our schools tonight. And then we're continuing to do a campaign around communications as to why attendance matters as part of our target strategy. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Esser, and he's going to walk you through some early data.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Board Chair Muldrow and board members. As Cindy shared, we have shifted our focus from the concept of habitual truancy to a focus on chronic absenteeism. So that means we're looking to have students at a 90% or greater attendance rate. We are cautiously optimistic and excited to share that our Black students have seen a 5% increase in both elementary and our high schools, and students with IEPs have improved by 4% in elementary and middles. And you can see on the screen the other progress that we've made in other areas. Out-of-school suspension rates have also decreased significantly. In-school suspension now accounts for a greater percentage of our disciplinary action, which reduces the amount of time students are spending outside of an educational environment. For Black students and our students with IEPs, out-of-school suspensions have dropped across all levels, reflecting again that cautious optimism. That said, while this represents progress, in-school suspensions still contribute to classroom absences and potential learning loss, which requires thoughtful consideration and intentional action. So these results are an early highlight of our collective commitment. And while there's still considerable work to do, we are really looking forward to building on this momentum. And the momentum that we're building on will be shared this evening from our schools and really some promising practices. So I have the pleasure of turning it over to Ellen and the team at Lakeview to talk about their work around culture and climate, relationships, and systems.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you to the board for inviting us to be able to share with you today. My name is Ellen Nordgren, and I'm the culture and climate coach at Lakeview. This is my 6th year working at the school. And I'm going to be sharing a little bit about our culture and climate data, and then 2 strategies, our grade level student services model, as well as our strategies for welcoming new families. Next slide. So first I have some MMSD climate survey data to share with you. This, we have both historical data as well as data from this year. This historical data was our first year as a community school in 2018-19. And that's also the first year that our principal, Nu Bang Vu, began leading our school. And at that time, our climate survey results, only when we look at staff, only 76% of staff said they enjoyed work, and only half of the staff said they felt safe. And then moving to this year, in our 7th year as a community school, we had 97% of staff saying they enjoy coming to work, and 100% of staff saying they feel safe. And that's not just, it's wonderful that it's showing up in the survey, but we also feeling that. We feel safe. We feel like a sense of belonging. We feel the love when we walk in the building. And then when we look at students, back in 2019, only 60% of students felt like they belonged at school. And that's up to 87% this fall saying they don't feel like they belong. That is a huge amount of growth, and you can feel it in our hallways. You can see it on students' faces. Our culture has changed, has shifted. Next slide. The first strategy that I want to share that really helped us to achieve those goals is our grade level student services model. So each student services member takes on 1 or 2 grade levels to be the main point of contact for the majority of student services needs at that grade. This includes things like family connections and supports, teacher teaming with the staff at that grade level, attendance support and monitoring, behavior response, coordinating plans for students, recess supervision, really being a part of that grade level so that we know kids, they know us, we know families, and we are really focused on those relationships. We actually stumbled into this model when we came back from school out of COVID. We all needed to change all of our systems, and we needed to keep one another safe. And to do that, we limited the number of contacts that we had with kids. So we created a pod approach, and we had student services staff assigned to certain classes to respond when behavior needs arose, to really team and focus on addressing those needs at the local level, like at that classroom level. And we quickly discovered that it was revolutionizing our school because we were creating these really deep relationships and this sense of consistency. And those 2 things support one another. When I show up for you, that builds relationship. And when I show up for you over and over and over again, I get to know your social interactions, the web of connections between kids. I get to know your family. I get to know what beef you might have out at the playground, because I'm your recess supervisor too. And when you struggle in the morning, I'm the one who comes. And then when you struggle after lunch, I'm the one who comes. And then I come back later and I talk with your family. And that sense of showing up builds relationship. And there are certainly times within this model that we need to think about, what does it mean to be a culture and climate coach? What does it mean to be a nurse? What does it mean to be a social worker? Times when I'm going to wear my particular hat. But so much of our work is at the middle of that Venn diagram. What does it mean to be a student services member? I don't introduce myself to families as the culture and climate coach or the behavior coach. I say, I'm a student services member. What can I do to help you? And we all do that because we all want to make sure that families see that we are there to help and support their student. And then there are times when I'm going to need to connect with the nurse because there's a health need for this particular student. I'm going to need to connect with the social worker, but I'm still going to be that person at the heart. And each one of us takes on that role at a grade level. And it has made huge impact in our climate. You saw the data there, but also like if you look at our behavior events throughout the day, 7 years ago, we had 20, 30 behavior incidents throughout the day. 3 responders all the time, responding all day long. Now we have 3, 5 behavior incidents a day. And I know that a particular student I work with is gonna struggle at 10:30 AM. I'm going to be there. I'm not going to let her struggle to the point that she needs a behavior call, because I'm already there. I'm going to help support her with the math she's working on so that she can stay engaged. And that allows me time to then actually teach a literacy group, because I'm not going to be responding to calls all day long. It has radically changed our work. It takes input of time, but it has saved us so much. Next slide. The next strategy I have to share is an attendance strategy focused on improving relationships and the sense of belonging for families new to Lakeview. So we did a deep dive into work in the 2022-23 school year. We did some work with the National Education Association through our community school. And we did a deep dive into our data, and we looked at our students with the lowest attendance, students below 75%. Those are students who are missing a quarter of the school year. And we noticed that 68% of those students were new to Lakeview that school year or had transferred in or out during that year. So our students in transition were our students with the highest level of attendance need. And that makes sense because we don't know the students as well. We don't know the families. We don't know the patterns. We don't have plans in place to support them. And so rather than waiting for them to struggle with attendance, we wanted to get ahead of that. And we think about how many students are we talking about. Our data last year for how many kids were moving in and out. 40 students transferred in mid-year, 33 students transferred out mid-year. That's not counting kids who were new at the beginning of the school year. So just within the school year, we had a quarter of our school, we have about 300 students. We had about a quarter of the students either coming in or out. So this is not something where we need to think about 3 kids. This is a lot of kids. And when we talk about a lot of kids, we need to think about a system. And so we have a system now to welcome new families in. That includes a welcoming family folder. We've put all of the resources that we want families to access. There's a snapshot of one of them. We make sure they're visually accessible. They're translated into all of our languages, focus on what supports and services do we have to provide to you? What are the key information? What do you need to know when you walk through our doors? And we sit with family and go through the information, because we can't just give people things. We need to make sure they get the information, but we also build relationship when we go through the information. I can show you how to be a part of our school. We also have a new family interview. Each student services staff will connect with that family for a 20 or 30-minute phone conversation or in-person conversation to really dig into educational history, family history, health needs, anything that you should let us know in that transition, we want to know so that we aren't losing things losing through the cracks. And then we have a checklist. We keep track of it for every single student who comes in, so we're not dropping things, because we can't figure this out for one kid. We have to do it as a system. All right, and I will pass it to the
Thanks. Before we move on, the principal of Lakeview, also the leader of our Hmong Heritage bilingual program, which is so amazing. I just want to see, if there's anything you want to add at this time. Before we move on, I know you'll be available for questions also.
Nothing more to add. Thank you.
Thanks, New. Okay, thank you so much. Next slide, please, Jesse. So we just heard from Lakeview. We heard some really amazing things that Lakeview has been testing out and seeing great success with. Now we're going to focus on Sherman Middle School. Alex Thompson, the principal, who I think is going to be on in just a minute, but I will take a few minutes to ground us in a couple of things.
I heard lots
Yeah.
of kids in the background
Okay.
on his phone, but he's gonna get on.
And if we've got a second to pause, I was so happy to be jumping into this conversation that I forgot to pass minutes. So.
Oh, Alan.
We're gonna pause.
Okay, so
We got so excited about the.
I was like, this is so grateful that you all did this today, and I don't take for granted that it's like midnight outside. Extra thank you. I move to approve the minutes from the instruction work group meeting dated November 4th, 2024.
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Pearson or Board Vice President Pearson. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Megan, your advisory vote?
Aye.
All right. That passes unanimously. All right.
Thank you, thank you.
And Alex is out.
Perfect timing.
I'm gonna take a minute just to talk about a few things and then I will turn it over to Alex, who is absolute the expert from his school. But Sherman is going to be really focused tonight, talking about some of the things they've done in terms of reframing chronic absenteeism, some of the strategies that Sherman can use to promote attendance, and also how they are really looking to elevate student voice, not just to hear students, but actually to use what students are saying in terms of action. Next slide, please. So before I turn it over to Alex, I want to take a minute to talk through Morgan, what you see on this slide, but also to recognize that Morgan has come to be from our late colleague Lee Vistra, who really worked on this and was a lead in this work. So I think it's really important for us to honor Lee as an individual, but honor the amazing work that she did to get us to understand who Morgan is. So I'll just ask us to take a minute to process that before I say a little more. So as you know, Lee was instrumental in some of the work we did around liberatory design and really rethinking innovative practices in evidence. Lee worked with a team of 3 middle schools last year to better understand why students that were below that 90% threshold were not coming to school. They spent time interviewing over 35 students, hearing from the students to understand what was it about their experiences that was getting in the way of them coming to school. From all of those empathy interviews and from the work that Lee led, Morgan came to be. So Morgan, who you see here on the screen, is really conceptualized from our middle school student that is attending less than 90%. We learned that Morgan was having some late starts to school. It's hard to get up in the morning. Because sometimes they had extracurricular activities, things for socializations, change in family needs. We learned that Morgan was having some triggers and or things that may lead to mental health. Sometimes it's physical health that you see signs of, headaches, etc., but could also be mental health, testing anxiety, some fears. We also saw some positive trends of what motivated Morgan, the school staff, the parents, those relationships, the collaboration, hands-on activities, having things that were relevant and connected to the learning, the field trips, the experiential, what they saw in terms of clubs and other things, and also what they wanted, their hope was wanting self-improvement. So this is Morgan, and from Morgan, our middle school staff, these 3 schools, took this on to really focus on what that meant in terms of how they were going to reculture their schools and really change the expectations around what attendance meant. So with that, I am now going to turn it over to the Alex Thompson, who is online.
Yes.
All right, could you go to the next slide, please, Jesse? Thanks, Alex. I really just wanted to make sure we framed that. I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, sounds good. Can everyone see me?
We cannot.
Okay. Trying to figure out where the issue. Oh,
Oh,
here we
you-
go. Now you can see me.
Yes.
All right. Well, let me talk a little bit about Sherman. Of course, the attendance streaks is our latest strategy born out of the work that we're doing across middle schools. It was us, Gillespie, and I believe Whitehorse, and we sat together thinking about both what it was that motivated kids to come to school to begin with, but then also what kept them there while they're there. And we started thinking about different ideas, like literally, like thinking about everything from celebrations to incentives. But one of the things that we settled on that I thought was personally, I thought was a low-hanging fruit and something to point attention to was the idea of building momentum, especially when it comes to being in the classroom, and how the barrier to some students wanting to engage in school is those interruptions. You miss a day of school, you not only miss that lesson, but then you're coming in the next day and you got to try to learn what's going on in that moment, knowing that there's gaps because you didn't hear what's going on yesterday, but then also still accounting for the learning that you're supposed to get yesterday to begin with. And the longer that we see students who are out of the classroom for whatever reason, and have, the more daunting it is for them to want to re-engage, whether that is because of suspension, whether that's because a student got sick, all of those things, build that anxiety that it's a barrier to students, trying to get up in the morning and then wanting to come to school. And so we started thinking about momentum in a positive way. How do we build momentum so that kids want to keep thinking about how many times that they've been able to come to school, and then instead of that next day being daunting, going to be a little bit easier because they've had the learning that they've got from consecutive days. And so we have a PBIS system, and we've been trying for years to create experiences that their kids are going to leave with and remember, and try to do things that are going to draw them in and want to keep them in our space. And so we started thinking about how can we reward students and draw attention to the amount of time that it takes in order to be successful in school. We say 90% attendance, but what does that look like? And it looks like you can miss about 2 days a month and still be on track for 90%. And so it's really important, stressing that importance to kids that we need you here every day. Even if you miss a week, you go out of town, that's a lot of learning to catch up on. And so we tied what we're doing with PBIS to our attendance incentives and started talking about streaks and how many days you can show up. So if you show up for 5 days out of the week, you get a stamp for all those 5 days and keep going until eventually at the end of the month, you reach that goal. There's a small incentive at the end of that. You can turn it in, you can celebrate them and really build some positive momentum and celebrate the joy it is of reaching 90% to balance, the other side of how we have to intervene with people and say, hey, you've missed a few days. We really need you in. And that's more of a negative tone with that. And so I think that the positivity around the kids have bought in. They know it's pretty much, hey, if I show up and do what I'm supposed to do and do that consistently, I'm going to see growth. And we're seeing that amongst our kids. They're engaged in all of our academic lessons, they're engaged in our social emotional lessons. And the feel that we get from day to day, looking at the kids in the hallway and in the classrooms, we can tell the impact from where they started to where they are now. And that was a bet that we made, just a hypothesis, using our scientific speak. And I think that it is paying off dividends, that the longer we can bring attention to, the amount of success students are having. And if they're there for 45 days in a row, it's hard for them to want to break that streak. I mean, some of us have experienced that with, our, I don't know if you have the Apple Watch, but it'll track how many rings you've closed every day. And so sometimes if you're trying to break that, if you get to week 15, you don't necessarily want to go to the gym. Maybe keeping that streak alive is just what keeps you in the gym for that day. And we're just applying that to our school with a lot of success.
Thank you so much, Alex. Hopefully you'll be here for questions after we get through our next few slides, but appreciate that. Next, we're going to just hear a spotlight from Memorial and some of the things that are happening over there. And so next slide, please, Jesse. I'll turn it over to Dr. Hendrickson.
Thank you, and thank you, board members, for having us here. I appreciate the opportunity to share some of the things that are happening at Val Phillips. I think as other schools have shared, data has really been a driving force in doing this work and kind of how we're looking at our systems. We got here because of the spring of 2023, we received our fall climate survey. And in that, notably, our students and staff weren't feeling safe or as safe as they had in the past, and our students weren't feeling that sense of belonging. And that hit home. That hit home. And we knew that coming out of COVID, as many schools, we saw that our increase in students struggling with attendance, that chronic absenteeism. You could also, it was palatable in our hallways. Our hallways were more active and not in a positive way. And as we unpacked that data, it was clear that we had to make some positive shifts in some of our universal systems. So with that in mind, the spring of 2023, we spent and took that opportunity to kind of rethink the way we did our teaming, rethink our systems and structures for that upcoming fall. I have Assistant Principal Blackmore here who's with me, who oversees our safety and security as well as our student services team. And I have her here to share some of the shifts that we've made and some of the data that we're seeing.
Thank you, Dr. Hendrickson. Hi, everyone. I am Suzanne Blackmore. I'm an assistant principal at Memorial, Bell Phillips Memorial. I've actually been in the district for, I believe, 16 years now, started as a social worker, and now have been an assistant principal for 6 years. Thank you so much, board, for having us share just a snapshot of our story. We believe in our students, we believe in people, and what I'm going to share is some of the work that we've done collectively as people, both our students, our staff, and our families. And that's really what our whole work is about, is the relationships. And so I am proud of the work and I'm proud of our teams. And I also want you to know we have a lot more work to do, and we know that. And we are very intentional about that. And so I want us to talk specifically about some of the strategies. Like Dr. Hendrickson said, we saw that climate survey data and we knew we needed to listen to staff and students. We knew we needed to reflect on it and we needed to make some adjustments. And the first key adjustments were that, especially around attendance and school culture and climate, it's everyone's work. So we had always had attendance living with 1 or 2 people. And the strategic shift for us was really mobilizing an attendance team that is interdisciplinary, and data is absolutely driving our decisions on a weekly, bi-weekly basis now, but we started really with a weekly attendance meeting. And specifically our truancy process. So when we came back from COVID, we all know it wasn't just an issue at Bell Phillips Memorial, but just in the nation. We were seeing students not coming to school, and we really needed to do something different. So the traditional way of when you're tagged habitual truancy is around sending out a letter, hoping that a family comes to the conference, and then if they don't, you're working with the student. And so we had noticed in our data trends around communication with families that really families were checking their emails, they were checking their texts, they would answer the phone calls. And so we just upended that system. We still send the letter, but it also is coupled with an email, a text, and we now offer once a week, we have Zooms. And the Zoom is midday and also at the end of the day. And our whole student service team, whoever can join, we're there, we go in a breakout room, we problem solve. But the piece about this too is that we are super thankful people are coming. And if they don't come, every week at our team meetings for the neighborhood team, we are making sure that we're making the connections with the students and families, and we're tracking that data. And so since we started this, we have seen a 38% increase in the amount of contacts we are having with families. And part of our shift was families at the center. The communication has to start there. We have a high expectation for our students because we believe in them. And we know the academic space, that instructional, the minutes are essential. And the more they're not there, whether it's because of truancy or tardies, we have to do better. And we want to be in partnership with families, and families want their students to be in class and, show their brilliance within that classroom space. When I say data drives our decisions, I mean, we as a team will sit and just grind it out. And if we have to invite other folks around the table, so for example, we're noticing, or especially with our multilingual learners, how can we work together to increase their attendance rates? So we would bring in the team and have that conversation, and we are brainstorming. So again, we have a lot of work to do, but everyone that comes to that table, we are thinking about what's our next move, and we are progress monitoring it to see if it's working. So if you go to the slide where our data, I just want to say, since we started this work, we've had a 13% decrease in the number of students that have been tagged for truancy. We also, I want to point to our data specifically around our focus groups in this slide. Attendance rates that have increased. There are attendance rates for our students with IEPs, English learners, and our Black students. We still have work to do, but we're seeing their rates of attendance increase. And that's what we want to see. And we're going to continue to work. We're going to continue to figure out what's our next move as we look at the data to ensure that we're continuing to go in the right direction. You want to go to the next slide? The last slide I just wanted to point out here, as Dr. Hendrickson said, this all started with our students and our staff were telling us that we don't feel safe. I don't feel a sense of belonging. We still have work to do here, but we have increased both their safety and the belonging on both ends, students and staff. And I put one last data point because I think it's important, and Dr. Hendrickson referenced this with hallways and just feeling like people weren't feeling super safe. And part of that was because of the fights that were breaking out or the physical aggression. So since we started this work, we have had a 43% decrease in our physical aggressions. I wanted to pull the last data piece because I think it wasn't just last year. So we wanted to compare 2022, September to November, and then September to November of this year. And we're already seeing a 74% decrease. And so the work is still there, but we have the people because we care about the people, our students, our families, our staff. And I want to just give a special shout out because our attendance team and our mobile response team are incredible. And Stacy Tobin and Morgan Anderson lead the attendance work alongside of us, and they are awesome. And we still have a lot of work to do. So thanks for listening to our story.
Thank you so much, Memorial. Could you go to the next slide, please, Jesse? One more slide. So this last slide is really where we're continuing to leverage student voice. And I'm going to turn it over to our student rep, Megan, that's going to talk a little bit about what we're trying to do to continue to learn from our students.
Yeah, so over the next month or so, we are having a series of interviews and conversations with students from West, Capitol High, La Follette, and East to talk about their attendance and kind of how it could possibly tie into their mental health. And then we are going to plan on reporting back to you in March with what we found with our trends. So yeah.
Thank you, Megan. Next slide, please. So before I turn it over to Chair Mulder, I just want to wrap up by saying that the data that we're seeing in terms of implementation data, we're really seeing success, and we're seeing incremental movement in what we are hoping to do, our goals in 2027. And the schools that shared tonight are spotlights of things that we want to consider across other schools in our district to continue to learn and improve. And we still, as Dan Blackmore said, we still have work to do. We still recognize that there's a need for acceleration, especially for our student groups that have been historically excluded. But we are really proud of the work that both the student and staff supports team is doing, as well as all of our schools. With the focus on students and a focus on kind of that. So with that, I think I'll turn it back to Chair Muldrow for questions.
Yeah, so I'd like to ask my fellow board members, because we've spent a good chunk of the last 40 minutes really hearing from educators to focus on, questions you have for Lakeview, Sherman, and Memorial. And then we'll move into kind of the greater conversation and let folks have dinner and hang out with their kiddos. Board Member Vandermeulen, I saw your hand up first.
Yep.
And then my fellow board members, if you want to let me know.
I have like 2 for each one. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
On Lakeview with new, I like how you're notifying everyone, creating the welcome letter, making sure it's not just given, that people actually understand what they're getting. It's because as the kid who always had it crumpled to the bottom of my backpack, so no one ever found it. I think that's incredibly important. The only thing I'm wondering is what happens when a kid may have a conflict with a specific staff member, and that staff member is in charge of their pod, and like class after class or year after year, can they switch to a different pod? That's my only question on that.
New or Ellen, who would like, Ellen,
Yep.
go ahead.
Thank you. So we definitely take into account things that students are showing us. And if the purpose of the system is to increase relationships, then we need to make sure that the relationship is at the center. Sometimes that means we're going to increase our attention, our focus, and it's our responsibility to build a relationship. That's always where we go first. Sometimes we discover that something about the fit isn't quite right, and there's a relationship with another student services member, and we always try to have that be someone who makes sense. Maybe it's a sibling is in a different grade level, and that the social worker is already working with the family with the second grader. Then the social worker, it makes a whole lot of sense for them to take on a fourth grader as well, because they're doing that connection with the family. So we are absolutely taking that into consideration and considering student needs.
I appreciate that. My next question is for middle school. I'm glad that the attendance streaks are going well. Here's my fear on it, that those kids who are chronically ill, those kids who will never get a reward for a streak because going 3 days a week is the best that they can physically do. How do we still address those students while increasing the norm? Because that I do worry about, because they're always, first of all, I don't want kids coming to school sick. That was lovely in the 80s. I recall my mom was a school guidance counselor. I got everything at least 3 times. Part of it was, well, I've had perfect attendance since kindergarten, so I'm not going to miss even if I have 102 degree fever. I don't want to encourage that. That was bad enough once. But the second one is for those who really can't physically do it. Is there an alternative way so that they don't feel left out? Is my main question.
I see Principal Tompkins back on.
Yep. I'm back. Well, starters, it's not a trying to school. It's about individual goal setting and getting students to try to meet that next step. And so if you break your streak, that's not the end of the world. It just means, okay, you come back from that. I mean, life happens. People are going to get sick. COVID is still out here, and people, they have to take time off, and that's okay. But when you come back from that, then we just start over again. And then you can still partake in that same system. And so it's not, we don't go all the way up to 100 days, and there's this magical like pizza party at the end of that rainbow. It's really about getting kids to that next day, and if we can get you to that next day, then we're going to celebrate that too.
I'm glad to hear that. And then my last question is on Memorial. I like with the truancy letter that there's another contact. As I said, I'm the kid who always had something stuffed in the bottom of the back. So that is definitely helpful, and I like that attendance is everyone's ability. The only thing I worry about when we're 100% data driven is that sometimes we can misinterpret the data, or people can not be seen in the data. Do we have strategies to work on that if they aren't?
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely have to take individual cases into account. Right now, this is looking at our universals. So we're really trying to build a foundation with our universals, and we know that there's going to be other workings specifically around individuals. We know life happens.
Appreciate that. And that's all my questions, Chair.
Thank you so much for your question, Board Member Van. Vice President Pearson.
Yeah, thanks. So I had a question for Lakeview. When I visited for the Hmong New Year celebration, I was told about just like your student population more in depth, and experience some of the student relationships and teacher relationships. So it's great to hear like this as like on a larger scale about what's happening at the school. My question is around just if you guys can just speak about one, your student population, because I don't know if everyone's aware of, I won't say necessarily Lakeview is in a unique position, but there are some things that kind of make your school more unique than some of the other elementary schools when it comes to your student population. So if you can kind of speak about that, and then just the cultural context and how you all are able to bridge those barriers of culture in terms of actual culture, and not necessarily culture as like the school culture, but individualized cultures. So
Sure.
thanks.
Do you want you to take that or you want to take that?
I got it.
Okay.
So our school, you're right, has a very unique population and a population that has shifted over recent years. We have so we are home to the only Hmong bilingual program in the state of Wisconsin, and one of only a couple in the country. So we have students who are attending our program. It's a heritage language program, meaning students either speak Hmong or their families speak Hmong, or they are culturally, they identify as Hmong, different from our dual language immersion program. And so we have students who are attending, who live on the north side. We also have students from around the school district who attend, and we also have students from outside of Madison who come to our school to be a part of this groundbreaking program. So that is a portion of our population. A shift in our population, we have many Afghan students who have moved to the Northport apartment and community center area. And so that has been a large increase in student population in the last, I'm gonna say 3 years. Many of these families are actually all related and immigrated at the same time. And so many of them know each other. And so it's a really close-knit community. And we used our flexibility as a community school to be able to have our family liaison really take the lead in providing really integrated supports and services. She spends a lot of time at the apartments, connecting with families, and really getting to know them where they are. For the first few years, we didn't have any translation services, so we used our language line. And so she's very adept at getting on her phone and getting on translation service or interpretation services to make sure that we were really increasing our communication. Because it's really easy for us to say, well, that's a little bit too tricky. Family communication can be, take energy and time. And I just credit our family liaison and really saying this is important, and we're going to really increase communication there. Let me think. So we also have many students who are recent immigrants from Spanish-speaking countries as well. So we have, we're thinking about how to welcome families that are new to the country, that need language support there as well. And thinking about, with our Afghan population, they've been here for, 3 years now, and all kind of came as a group. Our Spanish-speaking population, many students are coming, are new arrivals, and we're wanting to make sure they're feeling connected. And we're thinking about housing needs and other student services type needs that we want to make sure we're providing. So that is a population as well. When you look at our multilingual population, we are at we hover right around 50% of our student body are multilingual learners. That is double the district average. And so we have really done a lot of work as a school, thinking about what does it mean to teach multilingual learners. This isn't something that can happen with ESL teachers in a separate environment, pull-out program. We're gonna pull out half our school. That doesn't make sense. And we also know that what's good for language learners is good for all learners. And so we've done a lot of work in the last year with the WIDA 2020 multilingual work, training more of our staff so that it's not just something that's living with a few people with job titles. We do a lot of, let's take off our job hat and think about what do we need to do to meet the needs of students? Who do we need to train? Who do we need to bring in so that we are all supporting all of our students?
Yeah. I don't know if Principal wanted that.
No, Ellen is just doing a beautiful job of representing Lakeview. She has prepared very hard to share with you all about our school. Just thank you to the board for giving us an opportunity to share our story and the incredible work that's happening at Lakeview.
Thanks, yes, that was just, thank you for sharing that. And it's really nice to see on a larger scale, like how that is actually happening and actually seeing it happening at school is beautiful. So thank you. My next question is just for Sherman. And just like in middle schools in general. So I have a kiddo who previously was on not necessarily attendance street or something, but something similar of like a chart that able to get stickers or whatever. And I know the competitiveness or the competitive nature of like middle schoolers right now is insane. I have 3 middle schoolers, so it's always competitive. But it's in the same vein as Nikki's question, but more so just in general. And we know that sometimes when students, when they are on these kind of charts where, I won't say incentive chart per se, because as we've learned, that it's not necessarily an incentive chart. But in many ways, it can be, I guess. When students are on these type of charts and they may deviate from them, we know that sometimes behaviors can arise from that deviation because they've gotten into the not just competitiveness of it, but also into the nature of it being part of their everyday structure. So when there is deviation, are we seeing like large behaviors or behavioral issues that stem from it? And if so, or if not, just like how can we always try to make these systems a little better?
Alex, do you want to respond first from the middle school perspective?
Sure. I haven't seen behavior spike because of our attendance streaks. I think that our staff does a very good job of trying to humanize each other and to know that life is going to happen and it's okay for life to happen. It's okay to make mistakes. People make mistakes every single day, whether you're 12 years old or you are 42 years old. Like, you're going to make a mistake and you're going to have something that sets back. But we try to instill in our kids, it's not about the mistake. It's about what do we learn from it? How do we grow from it? And how do we get back up? And I think if we keep that mindset, not focus so much on, just an exorbitant amount of days, which I believe we cap ours at the quarter. And so we don't want kids going like, oh, the year's over because I can't get that 100 days. Like, no, if you can just take it just a little bit at a time, and give yourself some grace to where you can still come back and get right back on that saddle, then you're going to be okay. But it's all about that communication because we don't want that to be the end of the world. And we don't want the prizes are intentionally also not so high stakes that they're missing out on a brand new pair of tennis shoes or missing out on a computer. It's like, no, it's little things like you can get a bracelet. We may have a pizza party and you get a part of that, but it's not meant to be something that is going to be life-changing for that kid to get.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. And then my other question just around it, it's because I'm kind of like interested in it, is how do we connect this like with parents in our community? So I'm thinking, some students may not have that adult per se that, is monitoring that with them, but if there are adults around them, not necessarily as a parent or guardian, but community that is somehow stepping in to support the students, how does this kind of like work with in tangent with the community and or parent and guardians?
I think it works very well with our student-led conferences. And so that's something the slide that we put in for students to talk about their goals and what they have for attendance and what they're striving for. And they can also reflect on that and adjust. And we've had some kids that literally sat in their conference and said, you know what, I know that I've been playing Fortnite until 3 o'clock in the morning. and it makes me not want to come to school. And I have an attendance goal. I'm going to be on time this quarter, and these are the things that I'm going to do in order to be able to do that. And I'm going to have to put the joystick down at 9 o'clock, make sure I get to bed. And so I think that's the bigger piece when we talk about the social emotional development of our kids is, that goal setting, having not only goals, but then having a plan to reach that goals. Because a goal without a plan is a dream. Like if you have a goal, you have to have a plan to reach it, and helping them work through that process, helping them reflect on that and adjust. I think that's going to be what sets them up for success. And could be one of the most important things that we do, the most beneficial things that we do for our kids.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes, self-determination is probably one of the biggest skill any person can learn. And it's not often taught. So thank you for that. And that's all my questions right now.
Thank you, Board Member Mosner Feltham.
Thanks. Beautiful work, everybody. Really, really beautiful. I have lots of specific questions for Memorial, but I won't ask them because like they're really specific. Like,
Okay.
what does your data tracking look like? And like, can I see it and copy it? But I am curious specifically, like, are you looking just at like, is a kid in the building or are you looking at attendance by block?
I'm looking at all of it.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, so we're obviously, any missed instruction time is missed instruction time. So if that's 2 minutes from a tardy, 25 minutes from a tardy, or unexcused absences, that's part of the data system that you want to look at. It's all right there because we actually have it all in one spreadsheet. And that's how we hold ourselves accountable as staff to be able to follow up and make sure that we are connecting, because the relationship at the center and the problem solving with the student and family.
Then I think my question for all three schools, I'm curious about to what extent this work bridges into classroom instruction. If it does, if you hope that it will in the future, what that's looking like. Then I'm also curious, like, what have you found has enabled this work to take root and to be successful? And what barriers have you found that like you just like are trying to move and like it's not moving? So I'm sort of curious about enabling context and barriers, and also if and how it's making bridges into instruction. And if the answer is no, not yet, ask next year. That I totally respect that.
I would say yes, it's all connected, but maybe we'll start with high school and go backwards and then end with elementary. So I don't know if you all wanna.
Well, and barriers, I think you brought up that. That's, we've been kind of inventing a lot of that as we've gone. So I think that's one of the things that we continually are trying to make sure that one is accurate. And it's accurate with what district's seeing as well too. So any support as we build out systems like that, especially in the school, the less labor intensive acquiring that is, the more efficient we can be.
You wanna talk about?
I mean, instruction, to me, that's where the heart of the work is. We need students in the classroom. And so it constantly has to be a bridge for us to push ourselves and our team to figure out how that connection is going within the classroom space for our students. I also think one thing I talked about was we said this is all of our collective work. And when I say all students and staff, that's classroom teachers, that's regardless of your role, like we're all a part of this attendance work. And so are you standing outside your classroom and welcoming students in? We asked staff to help us in our Thriving Hallways campaign, and we do a lot of messaging. And so there's staff that during their prep will help us in getting students going to class. But again, like, how are we continuing to push into the classroom and understand what students need in the classroom? And they got to be there, right? And so that's that's one goal, but the next is like really digging into that instructional, like that space.
Alex, anything you want to add from the middle school perspective?
Yeah, I would also add in, the goal setting piece, and then connecting the correlation between attendance and the opportunity to be successful in the classroom. We know that regardless of the intellectual capacity of that individual scholar, if you're only there 50% of the time, like your ceiling is going to be a lot lower than what you're capable of. And so Um, I think that piece, our teachers know about it. Our kids are now starting to understand that, and they're taking their attendance a lot more serious than they have in the past.
You and Ellen, you want to add for Ellen?
So we've had some really important conversations about, you know, it's not just enough for students to be there. And it's not just enough in the case of like behavior response, it's not just enough to get a student back to class. And it's not just enough to get them regulated and be connected in class. We also need to know that they can access the academic work in front of them. And it is far more powerful if everyone in the school is connected and invested in that work. And so we've done a lot of work with, you know, if we're asking other folks to be doing work with school climate and attendance, then as student services staff, we better be doing work on the academics as well. And so we are providing small reading groups, and we're learning the, you know, the science of reading and foundational skills, so that when I'm bringing a student back to class, you can do this because we did this in group an hour ago. And I know that you are struggling with this particular task because it's one that we're practicing. And so if we see our work in silos, that's the whole point of the graphic that I shared. We can't do jobs based on our job role. We are all educators within a system within the school, and we need to be finding all of the ways that our work intersects and bringing each other up to speed on that.
I didn't hear, I hear like the, enabling factors and barriers.
Or data system?
I heard, key data systems for sure. But then I would just like to hear like, what makes it possible? Like when, as a board member, when I'm thinking about, what are the types of things that make this work possible for you? And what are the things that have made it, not just like nationally kids aren't going to school, but like, what are the barriers that you've run into consistently that perhaps we could do something about?
I think she came up.
Hello. I wanted to add to what Ellen shared, and maybe it might address your question, Blair. At Lakeview, we've been very intentional about the systems work that we do at Lakeview. We know that our work doesn't happen in isolation. It doesn't happen in silos. There is intersectionality. There is interconnectedness. For the last few years, we've come back to our work, coining it as our 3 big buckets of work. So when we think about culture and climate and attendance, that doesn't happen alone, right? And when you think about systems of supports, that also doesn't happen alone. And when you think about meaningful learning, that also doesn't happen alone. And so to build on what Ellen had shared, you know, we've been intentional about making sure that when we think about making sure that students come to school, we're also making sure that the learning is accessible. So what does teaching foundational skills really need to look like at Lakeview? And how can we be systematic about it? Because when children have the skills that they need to be able to access that book or that text, they then can stay in the classroom and want to engage in the learning. Compared to, you know, if it's hard, it's a lot easier to then throw the book and leave the classroom. So that's what we found to be our biggest piece of work at Lakeview. You know, just like what Ellen said, everyone is a teacher. Everyone has a critical part to play when we think about literacy and when we think about all students learning. And part of that has to do with relationships as well, right? And so when our staff builds high quality, deep relationships with our students, they're gonna wanna show up. They're going to want to try to do their best, and they're going to want to do their best for you as their teacher.
Thanks. Yeah, I heard you say clarity of vision, focus, everyone's in it, and interconnectivity is like what makes that possible. Probably you should feel pretty good about your work in that case. Thanks.
All right, Board President Nichols.
Yes. First I want to just start with like lots of gushes of like emoji hearts and faces, like what an amazing spotlight into each of your schools. So thank you so much. for something a little bit more specific, I want to just say for Lakeview. New, you will know, and Ellen, thank you for being here. Like, it is amazing to see the trajectory of community, being a community school over the years, what you're seeing in your climate data. And I loved hearing about just the way you were thinking about student services and that model. The one thing I'm curious about is in previous years, I always remembered that there was like the SST, right? The student services team, and it was the team that the students who maybe had a variety of challenges would kind of be referred to. And the SST would kind of put their best thinking about what that student needed, maybe reach out to the family and try to start doing some problem solving around. Is that beautiful diagram, the model that you showed, is that like the evolved new version of the SST? Or is there still kind of an SST that's doing, I don't want to say like triage, but like really focusing more on individual students who might need more tier 2 or tier 3 supports? Can you just help me understand how that all coexists or not?
Yes, of course. So we have 3 teams at our school that do similar work and have a lot of the same people on them.
Okay.
The team that you're referring to, SST, we call it SSIT because acronyms are fun.
Okay.
That's our student support and intervention team.
Okay.
But that is a multidisciplinary team of folks that are coming together about one student. We have done lots of things prior to, but we're at the level of needing lots of folks to really come together, bring the family in, sometimes even bring the student in and figure out the needs for a particular student. Sometimes in the process of referral for something more formal, sometimes just to catch the student where they're at and funnel things to an appropriate support. So that's one team. We should have tried some things before we get to that point because that takes time and scheduling. And we don't want to wait that long. To catch things right away, we have a mobile response team. And that's the people who are in our school who carry the walkie. We intentionally have as few people carrying the walkie as possible so that we don't have 16 different ways of doing things, right? We have a sense of consistency. And so those folks come together weekly to share, this is what I'm doing with this student. This is coming to a level of need. I've tried all these things, but I'm stuck here. What's your idea? We used to spend that time trying to like all get on the same page. We all responded to all the kids all day long. And we just needed to tell each other what we had done. Now we've figured out we've tried things, we've figured things out. I've been responding to them all day, but this part isn't working. I'm bringing it to my team. I'm going to consult. That takes way less time because it's more intentional and it's not getting people up to speed. It's consulting. So that's that team. And then the third team is the one that orange Venn diagram. That is our student services team. And that is a systems focus. We are trying to think about what does our school need. We have a lot of conversations about community schools type supports, basic needs that we're providing. We have a behavioral health in schools clinician, so we do connection there with mental health. Our nurse attends as well, so we get that connection happening in the health office. We are really thinking more long-term about how our school is functioning. That's where all of our attendance work is happening. So it's in between this like more long-term supports for one student and we need to put some Band-Aids on right now from a response. It's in the middle, it's the systems focus.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
That helps me understand a little bit more. Appreciate it. Thank you for all the work you're doing. For Sherman, Alex, I just wanted to say I love the idea of the streets. And I love helping young people see that you can build new habits in little doses, 5 days at a time, 10 days at a time. You fall off that habit, that's okay. We're gonna try to get back to building that habit. So I really appreciated seeing your attendance incentive program. And for Memorial, thank you so much as well. First of all, thank you for making what can be an awful experience of truancy for the student and for their families who are responsible, and really making it a more humanizing experience and one where you're more proactive. So thank you for that. My question at the secondary level is, are there other, and it's kind of going to what board member Mosner Feltham, I think, was asking around the enabling conditions. I'm curious, as at the secondary level, as you are tracking suspension rates, behavioral referrals, attendance, and all of the things that you're doing, have you also been able to see that you've tried some other things that you think are contributing to some of the positive results in attendance or decreases in suspension? And where my head is going, and it may not be related, is like when you were saying that like the fights were down, the first place where my head went was cell phones. Because oftentimes, right, like there's stuff happening, right? Social media, that is happening. So I was curious if, while you've been working on attendance, have there been some other things that you've done, like around new cell phone expectations or other kinds of social things that you've been doing with the students that's actually helping the attendance issues as well? So just curious at the secondary level, if either of you can speak to that. And it could be mental health support, it could be anything,
I love that question, and I think I knew we had like very little time, but one thing and a lot of like Cindy has heard me say this, and Laura, that we did so many different ththings all at once because we know like this system is so complex, right? And I always say we kind of are running a little city because we have 2,100 students and 200 staff. And so we of course did multiple other things. And one I'll just bring is our cell phone practice. We really borrowed this from East. Shout out to Patrice and her team and Mickey and her team. We are using that within the classroom spaces, right? And so I think that at the same time was, as we were working on this attendance, we also have always had a team, especially as Ellen's laying out her teaming structures. We have our, high level teams thinking about instruction, thinking about social emotional work. And also we have all of the teams that she mentioned, like mobile response. We pride ourselves in our relationships with students. And our team does a phenomenal job. We know our students, we care about our students, and we are willing to figure it out. So we have a lot of systems and structures that Dr. Henderson talked about are at the universal layer, but at high school, it can quickly move into what are our interventions at a tier 2, tier 3, and we can't wait for a meeting to problem solve that. So it's bringing people together and bringing folks together to really, partner and figure out what we need. But yeah, there were so many different things I'd love to share if you want to come out and visit, but I know we're short on time, but it was multiple factors because it's complex and,
well, I don't want to, we have a nice new looking building too, so it's a fun space to be in too. So that definitely is, when you talk about culture and climate, that has made a shift.
Yeah.
So we very much appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for bringing that in as well.
And I'll add, we definitely do not have a shiny new building yet.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Not yet. It's coming. But what I'll say, I'll talk a little bit about our yearly attendance data, because we are trying a lot of different new things. In 22-23, we started with off and away for the Sherman Day, just the expectation that as soon as you cross that threshold of that front door to start the day, your phone is off, it's away, and then we have a system to hold people accountable to that. And for that year, we actually increased our attendance rate for that year to 88.3. The following year, same system, same processes, increased it to 90.2 from that previous year for 23-24. So far in 24-25, what's new is the attendance streak. And so we've had the restorative practices, we have the advisory lessons with social emotional learning that's embedded throughout. We have our alternative to suspensions that we're trying for behaviors that it makes sense. And even with all that saying, the variable here is the attendance streak. And so far we're at 92.5 for our attendance rate for the year. So I mean, we were growing, you know, at a pretty good rate, you know, just trying to build the culture and climate, a welcoming environment. But I think that this has had an impact. I mean, even on the data itself.
Wow, thank you. Thank you all so much for all of the things that you're innovating on and trying and using the data to really stay after it. Thank you.
Right.
Already asked. I do want to share some really deep appreciation. I love data, really excited about data, but it's really, really exciting to hear the stories and the way that everything's functioning, connected to seeing these improvements in data. So I really appreciate all of you spending the time with us tonight. The only thing that keeps circulating in my head, and I'm not sure if fully answered this yet or if I'm thinking about the Venn diagram at Lakeview, which is, you know, just a purely holistic system, right? Everything that was really robust Venn diagram. And then the complicated factors related to Morgan. Was it Morgan? Morgan. And how some of those factors are within Morgan's control and others are. And so I guess what I'm wondering is if there's any more insight that we can get at a middle school level or a high school level around what are the ways that you are able to support those factors that are not within the student's control? Because I feel like mostly we've heard about what is in the student's control.
Oh, well, I mean, I think that's continued the kind of the out of the box thinking, or trying to figure those things out, because we know that life happens. That we're in a different place in space educationally, and that we're a comprehensive, very traditional high school. And that's not always the best fit for some of the things that are happening. So we're still continuing to try and problem solve individually with students as best we can. But we don't have the answer all the time.
I didn't know if you would.
And I would also say to, we're always thinking about what as a school, and I think I love the elementary model because I started there, the kind of generalist practice and holistic practice. We also want our students to access the beautiful things and the importance of the instruction, because we want to think about their post-secondary plans, what that means and what that means for them. And we know there are multiple things that you can't control outside of those four walls. And we have humans that are working daily with them to problem solve. And they have a lot of, I mean, as Principal Thompson said, students have so much to give on their own ideas of what they need and their strengths and what they need us to help, like from the adult side. But a lot of times they have a plan, and it's how do we help them activate and implement that plan? Because they have so much within that they're already like, they got, and we just have to help them, you know, kind of just continue to believe in them, and also do what we can to eliminate. And we have a great student service department and relationships at the core to figure out what we can help with some of those barriers.
The only thing I would add, one thing is, we've mentioned through our student services teams, mental health, and one of those is something that sometimes is under student control. And so at the high schools, you know, the investments in our school-based health centers that have licensed therapists and that space, and then some of our community partnerships, especially in mental health, just trying to continue to where our students need support, either themselves, their families, the adults in schools aren't able to and we're continuing to be more intentional and thinking through our partnerships and how they are wrapping around our students. I would just add that as one additional piece.
I would echo the sentiments of my fellow secondary colleagues. When we think about the things that our students can't control, it can get very deep very fast. There are a lot of struggles that, especially when you're working in communities that are very, very high poverty, there are some social ills that come with that. And I don't know if we'll ever have the answer of how we're going to be able to, control those things. Because if I could, rest assured, I would. But life is it can be difficult, and even more so when you're in some of those environments. And so our focus has been to try to make at least our school, that safe space and a resource for them. And so if they have a problem, we can work with them, maybe tap on some of the experiences that some of our staff members or community members have to help support them through that. But our focus is definitely on, making our space be different and letting them know that there's a different context and a different world and a large world out there, and there are multiple different opportunities that they have. And so that doesn't have to be the end all be all.
Thank you.
Thank you, board members. Again. Questions? No. Board member Castro.
Thank you. A lot of my questions have been asked already. I just wanted to share my appreciation and also just make the comment that I'm excited to see this work translate into students having a strong self-esteem of themselves as learners, and especially in the early grades, students having a positive association with school. If a young person develops a negative association with school when they're really young, it can be really hard to reverse that association. So trying to, develop a place of safety and area of strength, and where students can feel confident as learners is really important, especially early on. So thank you.
Thank you, board member Castro. I want to thank you all so much for this conversation. In a lot of ways, I feel like conversations I've been having at this table for years felt really illuminated by this conversation. And in part, I think I asked last year, when does a behavior dictate a response that is support and not punishment? And I think if you go back and you look at what our response to truancy has been over the course of history, it's been a variety of punishment. And often that punishment actually escalates a student's lack of ability to participate, right? And so it was really nice to hear the emphasis of meaningful relationships. Lakeview, I cannot thank you enough for highlighting and emphasizing the long-term reality of this work. That this isn't something we tried out for a couple of days and we're like, we feel great about it, that this is, a significant portion of time that we have spent building these systems and adjusting these systems to be highly effective. The other thing I love that you highlight in culture and climate data was the culture and climate data of your staff. And it made me wonder about the role of retention and the role of leadership and, what it means to have a certain level of stability and to have a team that is well developed and working together consistently. And so the things you highlighted were deeply meaningful to me. And the fact that each of you spoke to the importance of meaningful relationships with students, I think is a real shift in the way we talk about showing up for our young people. I want to thank Dr. Gothard for reminding us at the beginning of this conversation that we're not talking about these specific schools and their successes because we believe that one size fits all. We're really highlighting that each community is unique. And I think that was echoed by Vice President Pearson, who really said, let's talk about the unique demographics of this school and the approaches that you all are taking to serve the students that you work with. I think that is something we have to embrace and embody throughout the district. I think the other thing I wanted to talk about was kind of where the academic and culture and climate meet. And so I think it's so easy to dismiss culture and climate as, what difference does it make how people feel about the school? But I believe that there is an incredible link between how our students and our educators feel about their schools, and the success of our educators and our students. And so to tie that into what it means to make sure our young people are successful in the classroom, and to really be stewards of the unique perspectives of each child was pretty outstanding to hear. As a former student at Sherman, I think the long-term trajectory of that school and your leadership, Alex, is really important to get to highlight. And as a parent of somebody who recently left middle school, I can tell you that that environment can be tremendously demoralizing to a young person. And so to find strategies to reinforce positive behavior and to pay attention to positive behavior, right? Like that shifting of focus from what you're doing wrong to when you're getting it right, I think is tremendously powerful to see. I think the last thing I wanted to emphasize was, Megan, your portion in this conversation, and I really appreciated seeing the Greta quote about the role of our young people in terms of bringing kind of integrity to our process. And I think my only question for you is, I think adults, like as a parent, I think adults strive for meaningful relationships with young people a lot. And I wish it was as easy as like showing up and being there. But I think that there are some like pitfalls to trying to work with young people effectively. And so I am curious about the work you're doing and how you will let young people voice what a meaningful relationship really looks like and really means, and how it functions for students. And if you don't mind kind of speaking to, yeah, how can we invest in meaningful relationships in a way that actually works for young people?
I mean, from my perspective, I think honesty is honestly the best. Young people are so perceptive to the like world around them and around us, and we know when we're being kind of held in the dark, or like you're not telling us the whole truth, and like honesty, just like above anything else, is so important. And just like along with honesty, being genuine in that you care. There have been so many conversations that I know myself and other young people have been a part of, where we've been brought in to be the student voice and we haven't been taken seriously, or we've kind of been brushed off because they wanted to say that they talked to students, and they did, but they didn't take it seriously, and that was us. And so anytime that, you know, you're interacting with students and you know, you're wanting to get their feedback, you're wanting to engage with them, be honest and be genuine, because we can tell.
Thank you so much for speaking to that. And I guess my only follow-up question for you, Megan, is how can this body do a better job of using student voice to inform the way we make decisions?
Wow.
It's a big pressure.
Honestly, maybe having more than one rep, because I think I can only offer one perspective, even though I talk to students all the time, and that's like the whole point of this position, but I can't speak to the experience wholeheartedly of anybody else. And I think the past couple of years, the reps have primarily been from West. So trying to bring in different perspectives to this position, but also like as board members and as members of central office who aren't in schools on the day-to-day, ensuring that you visit schools as often as you can, even if it's just for like a band concert. Like when we see you in the community, like they notice, and then the day after it's like, oh yeah, did you see like board member so-and-so at this concert last night? Like she was there, she cares. So like, I don't know. Yeah.
I really appreciate that feedback, and also the ability to reflect on your own capacity to represent a 25,000 person student body. And also you do a really beautiful job, Megan. I'm so grateful that this board gets to work with you. My last comment is really for you, Assistant Principal Blackwell, which is we have worked together at a time period in which we had students that overlapped, and it's so easy for me to believe in the way that you approach this job because of the quality of care and the recognition of the really complex issues that students were up against. And so I'm so grateful for your leadership and your work. And I'm also really grateful that you highlighted the work of the principals at East High School, because although I think there is a difference in the approach, as somebody who went to East and as somebody who worked as a security guard at East, the difference in the approach to attendance is tremendous. And so I think highlighting Principal Mickey Smith is really nice to get to do, given the transformation of their hallways and the significant work that team is doing as well. I'm gonna give our partners with the schools an opportunity to say any kind of last things you all want to say before we move on to any other questions from board members around this presentation.
Inject music. I just want to say thank you. I mean, for us to be able to bring our work, and even if it's a small snapshot, we're bringing our students, we're bringing our staff, we're bringing our families when we come into this space. And so that feels really great.
All right.
We just feel really honored to be able to be here and share the good work that we're doing. We're proud of the growth that we've made in our all the things that we shared in our academic data. We're growing, and we're so honored to be able to share that with others and celebrate together. Thank you for having us.
Alex, do you have anything you want to say before we let you go?
Yes, I echo the sentiments of the rest of my colleagues. Thank you for including us and, bringing our voices to the table to understand the impact of the programs that we're trying and the things that we're doing to have an innovative approach to the way that we support our students.
Thank you all so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, schools. Thank you, team. Thank you so much.
All right. Board members, are there any questions you have that were not specific to hearing from the schools related to tonight's presentation? I am seeing none at the time, so the only is related to suspension data and how great I am to see that improve and how hard I know that journey has been. I really hope that our use of in-school suspension becomes academically focused, meaning that if we're having a student at school reflecting on a behavior, that is a portion of that time and that day, but the majority of that day is really about getting a student the support they need academically to be successful when they return to class. I understand there's sometimes there are behaviors that we got to respond to, right? And I think that there's a way to respond that can help our students get on track and stay on track. And so I hope we're doing that work together. If there are no other comments, I will entertain a motion to.
So moved.
Second, Maya.
All right, your advisory vote, Maya?
Aye.
All right, all those in favor of adjourn?
Aye.
All right, that passes unanimously. Thanks so much, y'all.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Maybe we have 10 minutes break.